Hello everyone. In this video I'm going to talk about some general concepts that goes into when it comes to developing games. So we kind of did at the first phase I was designing or coming up with concept ideas, concept generation. Now we are going to talk a bit about how to develop games and general things that goes into it. So when it comes to designing the game, now you need to think about where you want to create your game. So many of you are going to use game engines. I believe every team decided to use a specific game engine. So the main three ones that we are going to use are Unity, Unreal, and Godot. So when it comes to working on those projects, the basic of all three are very similar. You start with creating your environment and your objects, and then you go from there. Since all of the projects you are developing are going to be collaborative works, you need to have some kind of version control over that. That makes collaboration much easier for the entire team. When it comes to any game engines, there are some common terms that they use. For instance, game object. Game object is basically all of the stuff, all of the entities that you have in your game. Your player, your enemies, your obstacles, your objects in the environment to create doors, windows, gun, sword, a glass. All of those are the game objects that you're creating in your environments. Prefabs are very interesting concepts. So with prefabs, let's say you're having an object in your game that you're going to use it several times in your game. For instance, a type of enemy that you have. So you create a prefab out of that one object, and you simply copy and paste it or paste it in your game as many times as you want. With that prefab, the main characteristic of that object is going to be the same. And when you paste it in your game, you can change each individual one if you want to. But in general, it allows you to create one set of objects and then basically easily put them inside your game instead of creating them every single time that you need them. Another thing that most of game engines have is a scripting. So with any objects that you create, you can define some behaviors. So you attach a script to that object and it allows you to create certain behaviors for that object. Colliders, if you want to include any physics, like rigid body and collider usually go hand to hand, you basically play with those type of concepts to create that. Character control is depending on your game, the game engine that you're using, they are slightly different from each other. So it basically defines how you want to create different characters for yourself. Particle systems are very interesting and very nice. They create visual effects for you. Let's say you want to create a fire or waterfall. You can use a particle system to create those type of things for yourself. And then UI canvas are very important, and we get to UI canvases when we get to the interface design that you're going to have and how you communicate different things with your users. So these are general terms. There are some that are applicable to all of the game engines, and there are some more that specific game engines have. Their names might be slightly different when you go from one engine to the other, but the concepts are the exact same thing. I put some of the advanced terms that are used in, like, for instance, Unity game engine here, like Navmesh. I think other game engines like Unreal also has that. So depending on what you're using, they might have like a same name or a slightly different names, but the concepts are there for all of them. Okay, so source control, we talked about it in class, very, very important. Do not start your project before you make sure all of the team members are comfortable with GitHub, and you can create a project, make a small changes to it, like make sure all of the team members do that task. Like one person creates a repository and share that project with others, or add collaborators to your projects. and then make sure everyone make a small change, commit that to the main project so everyone feels comfortable using GitHub. After that, when you're assigning tasks to different team members, make sure everyone is working on something independently and different from others. That makes merging much easier. If two people are working on exact same thing and they're making different changes, it's going to make it confusing for GitHub, and merging becomes really hard. Okay, so when it comes to prototyping your game, we kind of like did the first stage of that when you draw on a piece of paper in class. So after that stage, now you need to put the concepts that you have, and you did like low fidelity prototyping basically. We are going to take it to a bit higher level when it comes to prototyping. So prototyping basically defining what you wanted to do, and it's like one of the most important things that you can do for your game. So when it comes to prototyping, you want to simulate the real and future product that you want to you have, so it can help attract customers to invest in the product before allocating any resources needed for implementation. You can test the design's correctness before it comes into production, and it can discover design errors. So we want to do that prototyping with the lowest cost possible. That is why I want you to do it on a piece of paper first, and then when we are ready, we are going to put it into a specific software. Use one of the game engines to kind of create our design concepts that we had. All right, so spend more time on the paper prototyping. Make sure the concept that you have is well crafted before you try to put it or use any engines to create that environment. So when you're ready to use a certain game engine, one thing that I want you to do first before going into depth with a character creation or environment creation is doing gray boxing. So gray boxing is simply using simple boxes or simple spheres instead of objects, instead of characters, instead of your enemies. So you're creating that top view of your game and putting all of the elements that you feel that is necessary inside your environment. This is very quick creation of that environment, that level that you want to have, and you can look at the flow and your game mechanics before moving forward. And then later on, when we are ready, we are going to replace them with a higher quality arts. And another nice thing about that is some people in the team can work on the gray boxing, and then the other team members can start creating the characters or create the art that you need for the environment. So that is a nice kind of distribution of the task between team members. So you can have like move different parts of your game simultaneously while others are working on creating the basics of your environment. There are different types of prototyping that we could have. So you can like do game mechanics prototyping, like interface, like look at your level design. So it depends on what you want to do and how you want to create your game. The team that makes that decision. In this class, I have 4 specific steps that I want everyone to take, and I found that to be very helpful when creating games. So we are going to start with the environment when it comes to game design. So first thing, we are going to work on the environment and navigation, and that is going to be our first deliverable. That is basically the simplest thing that you can do when it comes to game design or game development. So you create your environment and you decide how users are going to move around that environment, get from point A to point B. many of the stuff that you're going to have in this stage are going to change in the next deliverable. So it's like very important to take into account that gray boxing, put all of the things that you feel are important inside your environment and gradually replace them by the art that you have. Make sure user can navigate in that environment and it's very intuitive. So working on that piece that makes it intuitive takes time and it requires testing and lots of iterations. So I want you to focus on those two pieces. Think about what are the main elements that goes into your game and how user is going to navigate that environment. Don't worry too much about interaction. At this stage, user is not going to, for instance, open a door to get into another room or pick up an object or talk to another character or destroy an enemy. In this phase, we are going to focus on the environment and how a user is going to navigate in that environment. If you want to have more, is up to you. I'm not going to stop you from adding more to it, but what I expect to see for the first deliverable, which is coming shortly, is the environment and your navigation. I want to have the basics of those two implemented. When it comes to 2D environment design, many of the concept that we have for 3D applies to 2D, but sometimes you use a specific methods to create your design. So there are 6 different design types that we have here: sketching, game ready illustration, stylistic editing, specialized focus, texturing, narrative illustration. And I have the definition for each one of them that I want you to take a look and see which one fits your game concept better and which of these you can use if you're designing a 2D environment. Again, most of the concepts and game elements that we are going to discuss are going to be exactly the same when it comes to 2D games versus 3D games.